We are ready to start doing a training of what happens when you're going from data to instruction using that data to instruction framework. To set it up, I'm going to be speaking as if I'm doing a climbing the data ladder for a group of elementary teachers. And that is who I'm talking to. So now I will go into facilitator mode. Okay, now we have really accomplished a lot, and you've had a little break. So now we're ready to start on what I think is probably the most exciting part of this training, and that is where we actually take all the information we learned about our data. We learned how to use the Learning Continuum. We've learned how to look at the class view and the information it gets us. So now let's take that information and put it into some practical strategies, looking at exactly what will happen when we want to plan for instruction. And as I will go through a sample, and then I'm going to give you time for you to actually do some planning for how, so you'll have something set for when you first get back to your classrooms. Okay, now I'd like you to turn in your workbooks to your data instruction framework. Now this is just one sample framework. There's many different ways you could set it up. But this is one possible way. You may have something in your district you're already using, or you may want to design your own, and that is just fine. But we're going to use this one as an example. Now, the first steps you have to do are from yourself. You have to decide what is it I'm going to teach. So you have to set your own goals as to what area you're going to teach. I'm going to start that I'm looking at that data to instruction. You see, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to choose mathematics. And then for my area, I'm going to choose area. And I'm going to look specifically at perimeter and how it is one step you have to do to get to that standard in 5th grade for area. Now after I've done that, I go back to the Learning Continuum and I have to decide what the goal and sub-goal are that fit that. The goal would be measurement and data, and the sub-goal would be geometric measurement. So that's where I would go in the Learning Continuum. Now I go to that class view for me, and I have my class view here, and I have for perimeter is what I'm working on. First thing I do is look at how many different RIT bands do I have. And I see I have 5 different RIT bands, going from a low of about 171 to 180 and to a high of 211 to 220. So we cover 5 RIT bands. Once I've determined that, my next step is decide what is the middle of my class going to be, that middle RIT band or the middle range. Now this doesn't mean to look at the number and say, okay, I have 5, so the third one down is my middle. Because look at it, if you did that one, you would have only a couple of kids below your middle. So well, we're looking at the middle of the class, not the middle of the paper. So I go to the middle of my class, I think would be about 201 to 210. Something else that I would probably want to check is what the mean level would be, and that would be a 212.9 for 5th grade in the fall. That would be the grade level mean. Now I can see that that is at the step higher, but when I look at my class, that's the highest group. So I would not pick that particular space as my middle. So I have the middle of my class. You can see that is in orange. And the lower part, those 3 that are lower in green, and we have outlined the higher part in blue. So we have it divided into 3 sections. Our next step is to decide how we are going to group our students. Now, for myself in a classroom, if I'm doing just my classroom, I'm not sharing with anybody else, and I don't have any associates to help me, I will probably stick with 3 groups. So I would have my 3 groups, my group that goes from 171 to 200, my group of 201 to 210, and then the RIT band of 211 to 220. So when I put that into our climbing data to instruction framework, we can put in what bands we are, and you'll notice that in the data to instruction framework, they are flipped. Now we have our lowest on the bottom and our highest at the top. Where in the class view, it's opposite. So I would have that, and then I would have the students connected to it. Now I need to go back and decide what are the learning statements that I want to use. So I go back to that class view, and I look at my learning statements. Now I'm selecting a instruction of 1 class period, maybe 2 or 3, but it's basically 1 lesson that I'm going to teach. So I want to limit the number of learning statements to 1 or 2 for each level. To go any more than that would probably set myself up and the kids up for failure because we wouldn't have the time for them to actually master those skills. So I would decide what learning continuum statements we have. And I have pulled those out and I put them into my framework. As I do this, you'll notice that sometimes they are the wide statements and sometimes it's narrow statements. Remember, we talked about the wide learning statements. That would be, and in this case it works out quite well, that in every one of the RIT bands in the lower end all have the same one. They have one that says determines perimeter of basic polygons, so all sides, if all sides are labeled. Now that is what we has some complexity to it. For those lowest kids, we would probably just be using like triangles or quadrilaterals for them to be figuring it out. Where those students that are in the 201 to 210 group, that group might be going into having some kind of polygon that they put together that maybe has 8, 9 sides. So they have to be able to go through much more complexity, even though it is the same statement. So it is very easy when we have one statement that's for all three, but that isn't always going to be the case. If you look at our high group, you'll notice it has 4 statements listed, and I only selected 2. Those are the 2 that work best with the other 2 groups, so we're staying all on the same topic. We're just getting to different levels, but they're still learning something new, and they're being challenged also. So now we have our kids. We have our learning statements. So our next thing is we have to decide, how are we going to teach that? What are we going to use for instructional strategies? Now, we've talked about a lot of different ideas. We've talked about different websites you can go to and using your own materials you have. If you look at your own materials, your own textbooks, quite often they will have materials for different levels that you should use if at all possible. But feel free to use that internet because it has a wide range, and to also talk to the teachers that might be a little above, that they can help you also. So that is not something that we at MAP are going to give you, or specific instructional strategies to use for each one. You will have to select the strategies and select the activities that you want to use. But if you do that, you now have your lesson plan all ready to go and it's differentiated. Now that's one example. I'm going to give you time, and now you are going to go through that process yourself. Good luck.